for me.
I want to touch it.
Ooh. Come on back here.
I'm gonna get you.
I wanna get you, swim with you.
I'm gonna get you.
I'm gonna be your fast. Good feelings gone. Find my son Nemo!
Fish are friends, not grab shell, dude.
Grab one!
Duck!
That's not a duck, it's a pelican!
Everybody hold on!
Over here!
Somewhere on the sea.
How's it going, Bob?
You know I speak whale. Go.
Just as well, he might be hungry.
Don't worry, whales don't eat clownfish, they eat krill. Oh look, krill!
And watches the ships that...
Nice.
What if one tiny fish had to cross the entire ocean to save his son from hungry sharks to deep-sea dangers? This adventure is full of heart, laughs, and unforgettable moments. Stay till the end on SONU HUB to discover amazing facts and the full story behind Finding Nemo 2003. Finding Nemo is a 2003 American animated comedy drama movie directed by Andrew Stanton, who also wrote the story with Bob Peterson and David Reynolds. The movie was made by Pixar Animation Studios and released by Walt Disney Pictures. It features the voices of Albert Brooks, Ellen DeGeneres, Alexander Gould, Willem Dafoe, and Jeffrey Rush. The story follows an overprotective clownfish named Marlin, whose biggest fear comes true when his young son Nemo goes missing. Determined to bring him home, Marlin sets off on an incredible journey across the ocean. Along the way, he teams up with Dory, a friendly blue tank fish who is kind, funny, and always forgetting things as they face dangerous sharks, jellyfish, deep ocean waters, and many other challenges. Marlin slowly learns that sometimes you have to trust others and let your kids grow up and take care of themselves. Work on the movie started back in 1997 during the early planning stage. Andrew Stanton came up with the idea after thinking about different moments from his own childhood. He loved visiting the dentist because there was always a fish tank in the waiting room. As a kid, he imagined those fish had come from the ocean and wanted to find their way back home. That simple idea eventually grew into the story of Finding Nemo. To make everything look as real as possible, the Pixar animation team spent time learning about fish, ocean life, and how sea creatures actually move underwater. They studied marine biology and ocean science, so every swimming motion looked natural and believable. The movie's emotional and unforgettable music was created by composer Thomas Newman, whose soundtrack helped make many of the film's biggest moments even more powerful. Finding Nemo had its world premiere at the El Capitan Theater in Los Angeles on May 18, 2003, before opening in theaters across the United States on May 30. As soon as it was released, both critics and audiences fell in love with it. People praised its beautiful animation, emotional story, lovable characters, funny jokes, and Thomas Newman's amazing music. Kids enjoyed the colorful adventure and comedy, while adults connected with the emotional story about family trust and never giving up. The movie quickly became one of the biggest box office hits of the year. It earned around $871 million worldwide, making it the highest grossing animated movie ever at that time. It also became the second highest grossing movie of 2003 and one of the biggest movies in the world during its original theatrical run. At the 76th Academy Awards, the film received 4 Oscar nominations and won Best Animated Feature, becoming the first Pixar and Disney movie to take home that award. Later, the American Film Institute included it among the 10 greatest American animated movies ever made, and over the years it has continued to be recognized as one of the greatest animated films of all time. The movie also became a huge success after leaving theaters. Finding Nemo turned into the best selling DVD of all time, selling more than 40 million copies by 2006. For several years, it also held the record as the highest grossing G rated movie ever made until Pixar's Toy Story 3 passed it in 2010. In 2012, Disney and Pixar brought the movie back to theaters in a new 3D version, giving fans another chance to experience the underwater adventure on the big screen. Because the movie remained so popular with audiences around the world, Pixar released a sequel called Finding Dory in June 2016. The sequel focuses on Dory's own journey as she searches for her family while bringing back many of the beloved characters that fans loved from the original movie. Marlin and Coral, a happy clownfish couple, live peacefully inside a sea anemone in the beautiful Great Barrier Reef. They're getting ready to become parents and can't wait for their hundreds of little eggs to hatch. They're super excited about starting a family and even talk about baby names. Coral says she really likes the name Nemo, but their happy moment is suddenly ruined when a hungry barracuda shows up near their home. Marlin tells Coral to hide, but she ignores him and rushes over to protect their eggs. The barracuda attacks so fast that it knocks Marlin unconscious. When Marlin finally wakes up, he discovers the heartbreaking truth. Coral is gone and almost all of their eggs have been destroyed. Only one damaged egg is left with a small crack on its right side. Remembering the name Coral loved, Marlin names his son Nemo and promises that he will do everything he can to keep him safe. Several years later, Nemo has grown into a young clownfish, but the injury to his egg left him with a smaller right fin. Because of what happened in the past, Marlin has become extremely overprotective. He worries about every little thing and doesn't believe Nemo can take care of himself. On Nemo's very first day of school, their teacher, Mr. Ray, takes the class on an exciting field trip around the reef. When Marlin finds out they're heading toward the dangerous drop-off, he immediately panics and rushes after them. While Mr. Ray is teaching the class, Nemo gets bored and follows 3 of his friends to the edge of the reef. Out in the distance, they spot a boat floating on the ocean. The kids dare each other to swim out and touch it. Right before Nemo goes too far, Marlin arrives and angrily yells at him for putting himself in danger. While Marlin is busy talking with Mr. Ray, Nemo gets upset and decides to prove that he isn't helpless. He swims out toward a nearby speedboat, but before he knows it, 2 scuba divers grab him. Marlin tries to chase after them, but another diver flashes a camera in his face, leaving him confused and unable to catch up. The divers place Nemo inside a cooler filled with water, and one of them accidentally drops his diving mask into the ocean. Marlin desperately follows the boat but quickly loses it. That's when he meets Dory, a friendly blue tang fish who offers to help. She says she saw which way the boat went and happily starts leading Marlin, but after swimming for a while, she suddenly forgets what she's doing and even tries to swim away from him. When Marlin questions her, Dory apologizes and explains that she has short term memory loss and forgets things almost immediately. As Marlin and Dory continue searching for Nemo, they run into three sharks named Bruce, Anchor, and Charm. Bruce is a giant great white shark who believes fish are friends, not food, and is trying hard to stop eating other fish. Anchor is a hammerhead shark and Charm is a speedy mako shark. The three sharks invite Marlin and Dory to a meeting inside an old sunken submarine surrounded by dangerous sea mines. Even though Marlin doesn't trust them at all, they decide to go inside. Inside the submarine, Marlin and Dory are nervous the whole time. While looking around, Marlin suddenly notices the scuba diver's mask stuck on a piece of metal. It could finally tell them where Nemo has been taken. Dory picks it up and asks if the sharks can read the writing on it. Marlin quickly tries to grab it back, and the two accidentally start pulling on the mask from opposite sides. Suddenly, it snaps into Dory's face and makes her nose bleed. The smell of blood instantly drives Bruce into a wild feeding frenzy. Marlin and Dory panic and race out of the submarine. During the chase, they accidentally hit a circle of old underwater mines, causing huge explosions that blast both of them unconscious. At the same time, Nemo is taken to a fish tank inside a dentist's office in Sydney, Australia. There he meets a group of aquarium fish known as the Tang Gang. The group includes Bubbles, a yellow tang who loves bubbles, Peach, a smart starfish, Jacques, a French shrimp who enjoys keeping everyone clean, bloat, a nervous pufferfish, Gurgle, a royal grama fish, and Deb, a damselfish who believes her reflection is actually her twin sister named Flo. The group is led by Gil, a tough Moorish idol fish covered with scars from trying to escape before. Nemo also meets Nigel, a friendly pelican who visits the tank through the office window and chats with the fish whenever he stops. By soon, Nemo learns some terrible news. The dentist plans to give him to his young niece, the Duchess Darla, a little girl who accidentally killed every fish she's ever owned because she handled them too roughly. Terrified, Nemo backs away from the front of the tank and accidentally gets sucked into the aquarium filter tube. The other fish rush over to help, but Gil tells everyone to let Nemo figure it out on his own. He encourages Nemo to stay calm and carefully explains how to escape. After struggling for a while, Nemo finally frees himself from the filter. Peach proudly points out that Nemo's strength comes from being raised in the open ocean just like Gil. Gil then comes up with a risky escape plan. Since Nemo is small enough to fit inside the filter tube, he'll swim in and jam the filter with a tiny pebble. That will force the dentist to clean the tank and place all the fish into plastic bags. Once that happens, they'll roll the bags out the office window and make their way into Sydney Harbour. Some of the fish aren't sure the plan will work, but Gil believes Nemo is the only one small enough to pull it off. Nemo bravely agrees to give it a shot. Gil tosses Nemo a small pebble and tells him exactly what to do. Nemo swims into the filter and successfully jams the spinning fan, stopping the water flow. But while he's crawling back through the pipe, the pebble suddenly comes loose. The fan starts spinning again and sucks Nemo backward. The Tang Gang quickly reacts by lowering a toy strand of kelp into the pipe. Nemo grabs onto it, and together they pull him back to safety. Even though Nemo survives, Gil blames himself for putting him in danger and feels terrible about what happened. Meanwhile, Marlin and Dory wake up after the explosions and find the old submarine hanging dangerously over the edge of a huge underwater cliff. As they move around, the submarine tips forward and crashes into the rocky wall across the gap. During all the confusion, Dory accidentally drops the scuba mask into the dark canyon below. The two swim down to retrieve it, but they're suddenly chased by a terrifying anglerfish with a glowing light hanging from its head. During the chase, Dory manages to memorize the address written on the mask before they barely escape. Excited that she actually remembered something, she proudly repeats the address over and over: P. Sherman, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney. It's the first real clue that could finally lead them to Nemo. Marlin and Dory later ask a huge school of moonfish for directions. The fish point them the right way, but Marlin decides to ignore their advice because he thinks another route looks safer. Instead, they accidentally swim straight into a massive forest of jellyfish. They discover that the tops of the jellyfish don't sting, so they begin bouncing from one jellyfish to another while trying to escape. Marlin makes it out first, but when Dory doesn't appear behind him, he realizes she's still trapped inside. Without thinking twice, he swims back in to save her. He finds Dory unconscious after being stung many times. Fighting through the painful stings himself, Marlin carries her out of the jellyfish field. By the time he reaches safety, he is exhausted, badly stung, and can barely stay awake. As he finally passes out, a huge mysterious shadow slowly appears above them. Casting the casting of Finding Nemo 2003, Albert Brooks brought Marlin to life as the overprotective clownfish father whose journey drives the entire narrative. Brooks, known for his neurotic comedic style in films like Lost in America and Defending Your Life, was not the first choice for the role. William H. Macy initially recorded a significant portion of the dialogue for Marlin. Director Andrew Stanton felt the performance needed a lighter, more anxious touch to capture the character's blend of worry and reluctant heroism. Switching to Brooks saved the film, according to Stanton, allowing Marlin's personality to click with the animation and story beats. Brooks embraced the role of a clownfish who isn't inherently funny, even recording outtakes where Marlin attempts terrible jokes, adding layers of self-deprecating humor that resonated throughout the production. Brooks' vocal delivery perfectly conveyed Marlin's transformation from a cautious parent paralyzed by loss to a determined adventurer crossing the ocean. His natural cadence, fast talking, exasperated and endearingly flawed, mirrored the animation's emphasis on expressive fish faces and body language. The casting decision highlighted Pixar's approach of prioritizing actors who could infuse emotional depth rather than relying solely on star power or cartoonish voices. Brooks's commitment extended to multiple recording sessions where he improvised lines that enhanced the father's dynamic, particularly in scenes of panic and eventual growth. His performance anchored the film's themes of letting go and overcoming fear, making Marlin one of Pixar's most relatable protagonists. Ellen DeGeneres portrayed Dory, the regal blue tang with short-term memory loss, whose optimism and forgetfulness provide both comic relief and crucial support to Marlin's quest. Stanton originally envisioned Dory as a male character, but a pivotal moment changed everything. While watching the Ellen DeGeneres show with his wife, Stanton observed DeGeneres rapidly changing subjects mid-sentence multiple times. This inspired him to rewrite Dory as female and cast DeGeneres specifically for her rambling, upbeat delivery style. DeGeneres has shared how Stanton heard her voice on TV and wrote the character with her in mind, leading to a seamless fit. DeGeneres' casting was unconventional at the time, as she was primarily known for stand-up and her sitcom rather than extensive voice work in animation. Her natural improvisational skills allowed for the creation of Dory's iconic non sequiturs and Just Keep Swimming mantra, which became cultural touchstones. The role required balancing absent mindedness with genuine emotional intelligence, especially in moments where Dory's memory issues create tension but also reveal her loyalty and problem solving under pressure. DeGeneres recorded extensive sessions, often riffing on lines to heighten the humor and heart. This performance not only elevated the film but also demonstrated Pixar's willingness to take risks with casting to achieve authentic character voices that felt lived in rather than performed. Dory's popularity led to her own sequel, underscoring the impact of this choice. Alexander Gould voiced young Nemo, the curious clownfish whose capture sets the adventure in motion. As a child actor, Gould brought an authentic youthful energy and wide-eyed wonder to the role. His casting captured the innocence and bravery needed for Nemo's arc, from a rebellious son testing boundaries to a resourceful captive helping orchestrate an escape. Gould's performance in scenes like the dentist tank interactions felt genuine, avoiding the pitfall of overly precocious child voices common in animation. His delivery of lines expressing fear, excitement, and determination added emotional weight to the father son separation theme. Gould was relatively new to major voice roles at the time, making his selection a testament to Pixar's focus on finding the right fit over established names for younger characters. Willem Dafoe took on Gil, the scarred Moorish idol fish and leader of the Tang gang in the dentist's office. Dafoe's intense, gravelly voice and dramatic background brought gravitas and quiet authority to the character, who mentors Nemo and devises escape plans. Jill's design even incorporated facial features inspired by Dafoe, such as lines around the mouth, mimicking the actor's distinctive wrinkles. Dafoe based elements of the voice on a character from his film Animal Factory, lending a world-weary toughness suitable for a fish with a history of failed escapes and battle scars. His casting added dramatic weight to the aquarium subplot, contrasting the open ocean's freedom with confinement. Dafoe's commitment to the role included nuanced line readings that conveyed leadership, regret, and hope, enriching the ensemble dynamics in the tank scenes. Brad Garrett voiced Bloat, the porcupine pufferfish known for inflating when agitated. Garrett, a comedian with a deep, booming voice, perfectly suited the character's short-tempered yet loyal personality. His performance as Bloat contributed to the Tangang's comedic chemistry. The casting of Finding Nemo 2003, Albert Brooks brought Marlin to life as the overprotective clownfish father whose journey drives the entire narrative. Brooks, known for his neurotic comedic style in films like Lost in America and Defending Your Life, was not the first choice for the role. William H. Macy initially recorded a significant portion of the dialogue for Marlin. Director Andrew Stanton felt the performance needed a lighter, more anxious touch to capture the character's blend of worry and reluctant heroism. Switching to Brooks saved the film, according to Stanton, allowing Marlin's personality to click with the animation and story beats. Brooks embraced the role of a clownfish who isn't inherently funny, even recording outtakes where Marlin attempts terrible jokes, adding layers of self-deprecating humor that resonated throughout the production. Brooks' vocal delivery perfectly conveyed Marlin's transformation from a cautious parent paralyzed by loss to a determined adventurer crossing the ocean. His natural cadence, fast talking, exasperated, and endearingly flawed, mirrored the animation's emphasis on expressive fish faces and body language. The casting decision highlighted Pixar's approach of prioritizing actors who could infuse emotional depth rather than relying solely on star power or cartoonish voices. Brooks's commitment extended to multiple recording sessions where he improvised lines that enhanced the father-son dynamic, particularly in scenes of panic and eventual growth. His performance anchored the film's themes of letting go and overcoming fear, making Marlin one of Pixar's most relatable protagonists. Ellen DeGeneres portrayed Dory, the regal blue tang with short-term memory loss, whose optimism and forgetfulness provide both comic relief and crucial support to Marlin's quest. Stanton originally envisioned Dory as a male character, but a pivotal moment changed everything. While watching the Ellen DeGeneres show with his wife, Stanton observed DeGeneres rapidly changing subjects mid-sentence multiple times. This inspired him to rewrite Dory as female and cast DeGeneres specifically for her rambling, upbeat delivery style. DeGeneres has shared how Stanton heard her voice on TV and wrote the character with her in mind, leading to a seamless fit. DeGeneres' casting was unconventional at the time, as she was primarily known for stand-up and her sitcom rather than extensive voice work in animation. Her natural improvisational skills allowed for the creation of Dory's iconic non sequiturs and "Just Keep Swimming" mantra, which became cultural touchstones. The role required balancing absent-mindedness with genuine emotional intelligence, especially in moments where Dory's memory issues create tension but also reveal her loyalty and problem solving under pressure. DeGeneres recorded extensive sessions, often riffing on lines to heighten the humor and heart. This performance not only elevated the film but also demonstrated Pixar's willingness to take risks with casting to achieve authentic character voices that felt lived in rather than performed. Dory's popularity led to her own sequel, underscoring the impact of this choice. Alexander Gould voiced young Nemo, the curious clownfish whose capture sets the adventure in motion. As a child actor, Gould brought an authentic youthful energy and wide-eyed wonder to the role. His casting captured the innocence and bravery needed for Nemo's arc, from a rebellious son testing boundaries to a resourceful captive helping orchestrate an escape. Gould's performance in scenes like the dentist-tank interactions felt genuine, avoiding the pitfall of overly precocious childhood voices common in animation. His delivery of lines expressing fear, excitement, and determination added emotional weight to the father-son separation theme. Gould was relatively new to major voice roles at the time, making his selection a testament to Pixar's focus on finding the right fit over established names for younger characters. Willem Dafoe took on Gil, the scarred Moorish idolfish and leader of the tank gang, in the dentist's office. Dafoe's intense, gravelly voice and dramatic background brought gravitas and quiet authority to the character, who mentors Nemo and devises escape plans. Gil's design even incorporated facial features inspired by Dafoe, such as lines around the mouth mimicking the actor's distinctive wrinkles. Dafoe based elements of the voice on a character from his film Animal Factory, lending a world-weary toughness suitable for a fish with a history of failed escapes and battle scars. His casting added dramatic weight to the aquarium subplot, contrasting the open ocean's freedom with confinement. Dafoe's commitment to the role included nuanced line readings that conveyed leadership, regret, and hope, enriching the ensemble dynamics in the tank scenes. Brad Garrett voiced Bloat, the porcupine pufferfish known for inflating when agitated. Garrett, a comedian with a deep booming voice, perfectly suited the character's short-tempered yet loyal personality. His performance as Bloat contributed to the Tang Gang's comedic chemistry, delivering lines with authoritative bluster during initiation ceremonies and escape attempts. Garrett's voice work in Pixar projects, including earlier roles like Dim in A Bug's Life, made him a reliable choice for memorable supporting fish characters. The physical comedy of Bloat puffing up aligned seamlessly with Garrett's exaggerated vocal style, creating some of the film's funniest moments in the confined tank setting. Alison Janney lent her distinctive voice to Peach, the starfish who acts as the lookout for the tank gang. Janney's sharp, no-nonsense delivery brought practicality and sarcasm to the group. Helping coordinate plans from her position on the tank glass, her casting exemplified Pixar's use of talented character actors to flesh out ensemble roles with minimal screen time but maximum impact. Peach's observations and interactions with the dentist added layers of humor and tension to the aquarium sequences. Austin Pendleton provided the voice for Gurgle, the overly cautious royal grama fish. Pendleton's hesitant, neurotic tone fit the hypochondriac personality, contributing to the tank gang's diverse dynamics. His performance highlighted themes of overcoming fear within the confined space, paralleling Marlin's broader journey. Stephen Root voiced Bubbles, the yellow tang obsessed with bubbles. Root's enthusiastic, simple delivery captured the character's childlike fixation, adding charm and levity to tank scenes. His work in voice acting across various projects made him ideal for this quirky supporting role. Vicki Lewis portrayed Deb and her reflection, Flo, the four-striped damselfish who believes her reflection is a twin sister. Lewis infused the character with delusional cheerfulness and sisterly affection, creating one of the film's most endearing and humorous quirks. The dual performance required subtle vocal distinctions to differentiate the sisters, showcasing her range. Joe Romt, a Pixar storyboard artist and frequent voice contributor, voiced Jacques, the obsessive-compulsive cleaner shrimp. Ranau's French-accented performance brought precision and fastidiousness to the role, with Jacques' cleaning rituals providing comic timing and visual gags. Ranf's involvement in multiple Pixar films as both creator and voice talent underscored the studio's collaborative spirit. Geoffrey Rush played Nigel, the Australian pelican who aids Marlin and Dory. Rush's theatrical voice and comedic timing suited the helpful but clumsy production development and pre-production. The seeds of Finding Nemo were planted long before Pixar ever opened a story file for the project. Rooted in a handful of personal memories belonging to director Andrew Stanton, as a child, Stanton was fascinated by the aquarium tanks that dentists kept in their waiting rooms, and he used to imagine that the fish swimming behind the glass had once belonged to the ocean and were quietly plotting a way back home. That daydream, half whimsical and half melancholy, stayed with him well into adulthood, and it eventually became the emotional backbone of the film's subplot involving Nemo's captivity in a dentist fish tank in Sydney. A second formative experience arrived in 1992, not long after Stanton's first child was born. He and his family visited Marine World, the aquatic theme park, later rebranded as Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, and while walking through the Shark Tunnel and other exhibits, Stanton found himself struck by how vividly the undersea world could be rendered using computer animation. At the time, Pixar had not yet released its first feature film, and the technology to convincingly depict flowing water, refracted light, and marine textures was still developing. But the impression left on Stanton by that visit lingered as an idea worth pursuing once the studio had the tools to do it justice. The third and perhaps most personally resonant piece of the puzzle arrived in 1997 when Stanton took his young son for a walk in a park. Partway through the outing, he became conscious of the fact that he was hovering over his son, correcting his every movement and steering him away from perceived dangers. And he realized in that moment that his own overprotectiveness had cost him a genuine father son experience that day. That flash of self recognition became the thematic core of the film. A story about a parent who loves his child so fiercely that the love curdles into over control, and about the necessary painful process of learning to let a child go. Stanton has also spoken about how the specific choice of species for his central characters came from an image rather than an abstract concept. In an interview with National Geographic magazine, he recalls seeing a photograph of two clownfish peeking out from the folds of a sea anemone, an image he described as immediately arresting. Even though he did not yet know what kind of fish they were, he was drawn to them in part because of the accident of their common name. For a story that trades on comic misadventure, the fact that the fish were literally called clownfish struck him as almost too perfected to pass up, and he felt there was something universally charming about small animals that seem to want to play peekaboo with an observer. Beyond the name, the biology of the species suited the story mechanically as well as thematically. Clownfish are vividly colored, which lent itself to Pixar's strengths in rendering saturated, painterly underwater environments, but they are also a species that tends to stay close to the protective, stinging tentacles of its host anemone rather than roaming freely through the reef. For a character who needed a plausible reason to be sheltered and fearful of the open ocean, and for a story that needed to send that character on an unwilling voyage across dangerous, unfamiliar waters, the natural skittishness of clownfish gave Stanton a built-in justification for both the character's personality and the plot's premise. Formal pre-production on the film began in early 1997, while Stanton was still finishing up his work on Pixar's second feature, A Bug's Life, which itself would not reach theaters until later that year. Rather than treating Finding Nemo as a project to be tackled, once A Bug's Life had wrapped, Stanton began drafting the screenplay for the fish story during that film's post-production phase, effectively working on two Pixar productions in an overlapping timeline. This head start had an unusual consequence. Finding Nemo entered full production already equipped with a complete screenplay, a rarity in the field of animated filmmaking, where scripts are often reworked continuously throughout years of storyboarding and story reel revisions. Lee Unkrich, who served as co-director on the project, alongside Stanton and fellow Pixar veteran Lee Unkrich, described this as highly unusual for an animated film, since most projects of this scale evolve their narrative structure deep into production, as sequences are storyboarded, tested with audiences, and reworked based on what plays and what doesn't. Because the film's setting was almost entirely aquatic, the production required its artists to develop an intimate technical understanding of an environment none of them had previously needed to render in such detail. Pixar's animators and artists undertook scuba diving lessons specifically so they could study coral reefs firsthand, observing not just how fish look but how they move, how light behaves as it filters down through water at different depths, and how the buoyancy of an aquatic environment changes the physics of motion compared to anything the studio had animated before. This was consistent with Pixar's broader working method on nearly all of its films, in which the studio invests in giving its artists direct, physical exposure to whatever world or activity a given film is trying to depict. On the theory That authentic observation produces more convincing and more inventive animation than reference photographs or existing footage ever could. Several elements of the film's story evolved substantially during this pre-production period before settling into the form audiences eventually saw. Stanton originally intended to structure the story around a series of flashbacks that would gradually reveal the fate of Coral, Marlin's wife, and Nemo's mother, who, along with all but one of her eggs, is killed in the film's opening Barracuda attack. As he worked through the structure, however, Stanton recognized a problem. If the details of Coral's death were parceled out gradually across flashbacks, there would be nothing left to reveal by the time the story reached its natural endpoint, robbing the technique of its purpose. He resolved this by moving the entire sequence to the very beginning of the film, establishing the tragedy up front rather than treating it as a mystery to be unspooled. This decision shaped the entire emotional architecture of the finished film, since audiences enter the story already understanding exactly why Marlin behaves the way he does toward his one surviving son, the character of Gil, the scarred Moorish idol, who leads the tank gang of aquarium fish that Nemo meets after his capture, also went through a considerable transformation from his earliest conception to his final form. In a scene that was ultimately cut from the film, an early version of Gil tried to impress young Nemo by inventing an elaborate backstory, claiming he originally came from a place called Bad Luck Bay and had numerous siblings. The scene was designed so that Nemo would later discover Jill had fabricated the entire story after hearing a human patient in the dentist's waiting room reading aloud from a children's storybook that contained exactly the same details Jill had claimed as his own history. While this sequence was eventually removed, it illustrates how much groundwork the writers put into fleshing out supporting characters, even when the material never made it to the final cut, and it hints at a more roguish, less immediately trustworthy version of Gil than the one who eventually appears on screen as a battle-scarred but fundamentally decent mentor figure to Nemo. Casting decisions during this period proved equally consequential and in at least one instance required a dramatic mid-course correction. The role of Marlin was first recorded by the actor William H. Macy, known for his understated, often melancholic dramatic performances. Macy recorded a substantial portion of the character's dialogue, but as Stanton listened to the results, he came to feel that the character needed a different comic register, something lighter and more instinctively funny than what Macy's naturally dramatic delivery was providing. Stanton subsequently cast comedian Albert Brooks in the role, a decision he later characterized as having effectively saved the film. Brooks brought to the role an approach that played with the character's built-in irony. He liked the idea of a clownfish, a species whose very name promises humor, who is in fact not funny at all, anxious and fussy rather than droll. During recording sessions, Brooks reportedly improvised outtakes in which Marlin attempted to tell deliberately bad jokes, leaning into the discomfort of a character whose species name sets an expectation his personality can't fulfill. The film's other central voice performance, that of the forgetful blue tank Dory, arrived through an equally serendipitous process. Stanton had originally conceived of the character as male, but his thinking shifted after he happened to watch an episode of the sitcom Ellen and observed star Ellen DeGeneres changed the subject of a conversation multiple times before she managed to complete a single sentence. That specific comic rhythm, a kind of associative wandering train of thought that never quite reaches its destination before veering off towards something new, struck Stanton as the perfect embodiment of a character suffering from short-term memory loss, and he cast DeGeneres in the role on the strength of that observation. The idea for the film's early initiation sequence, the scene in which Dory demonstrates her particular gift for speaking whale, reportedly emerged organically out of a story conference between Stanton and co-writer Bob Peterson while the two were driving to a recording session with the voice cast, suggesting that some of the film's most memorable material was generated in exactly the loose improvisational environment that Pixar's process was designed to encourage. Not every planned character survived the development process. An early version of the story featured a pelican named Gerald, conceived as a friend and foil to Nigel, the pelican who eventually becomes an ally to Marlin, Dory, and the Tank Gang. The two pelicans were designed to contrast with one another, with Nigel written as fastidious and neat, while Gerald was scruffy and sloppy, playing the two off each other for comic effect. In the finished film, Gerald survives only as a minor figure who accidentally swallows Marlin and Dory at one point in the story, choking on them in a brief comic beat, but his larger role as a fully developed secondary character was minimized during production. Once the filmmakers found that his scenes were slowing the film's pace and that the character wasn't integrating cleanly into the overall structure of the story, trimming characters and subplots that don't serve the film's momentum, even ones that were once envisioned as significant, has long been part of Pixar's editorial process, and Gerald's reduced role is one of the more visible traces of that process in the finished picture. Some casting choices arose almost by accident from the day-to-day culture of the studio itself. Stanton ultimately provided the voice of Crush, the laid-back sea turtle who guides Marlin and Dory through the East Australian current, a performance he had originally recorded purely as a placeholder for the film's story reel. The rough animatic used internally to test how sequences play before final animation and final voice casting are locked in. Stanton assumed at the time that a professional actor would eventually replace his temporary recording. However, when the story reel was shown in test screening, audiences responded so strongly to Stanton's off-the-cuff performance that the decision was made to keep him in the role permanently. He recorded the character's finished dialogue while lying down on a sofa in Uncritch's office, a physical position evidently chosen to help him access the character's unhurried, sulfur-inflected cadence. Crush's son Squirt was voiced by Nicholas Bird, the young son of fellow Pixar director Brad Bird. According to Stanton, the elder Bird had been playing a tape recording of his son's voice around the studio, and upon hearing it, Stanton was struck by the sense that the recording captured something he described as this generation's Thumper, referencing the beloved young rabbit character from Disney's Bambi, and he cast the boy in the role essentially on the spot. Not every planned casting choice made it to the final film. Actress Megan Mullally was originally set to provide a voice for one of the film's characters. According to Mullally's own account, the production team was reportedly stunned to discover that the distinctive nasal high-pitched voice she used for her character Karen Walker on the television series Will and Grace was not in fact her natural speaking voice, but rather a performance choice specific to that role. Despite this revelation, the production hired her anyway and then strongly encouraged her to use the Karen Walker voice for her Finding Nemo character. When Mullally declined to do so, preferring to use a voice closer to her own, She was ultimately dismissed from the production, and her recorded material did not make it into the finished film. Achieving convincing fish movement was one of the central technical and artistic challenges facing the animation team, and the studio approached it with the same research heavy methodology it had applied to other unfamiliar subjects in its earlier films. Animators undertook what amounted to a crash course in fish biology and oceanography, a program that included visits to aquariums, diving expeditions in Hawaii to observe reef fish in their natural habitat, and in-house lectures delivered by a professional ichthyologist brought in specifically to educate the animation staff on how different fish species swim, school, and interact with their environment. This grounding in real biological observation proved crucial to giving the film's characters a believable physical presence even as they were given exaggerated anthropomorphic personalities and expressions. Ginny Cruz Santos, the Pixar animator responsible for bringing Dory to life, later described her approach as an effort to integrate authentic fish movement with human style movement and facial expressiveness, blending the two so that the character would read simultaneously as a real fish and as a fully realized, emotionally legible character that audiences could relate to on a human level. Visual development on the film was guided in large part by production designer Ralph Eggleston, whose pastel drawings and color studies served as the template that the lighting department, led by director of photography Sharon Callahan, used to determine how every scene in the film should be lit. This workflow, in which a production designer's painterly studies inform the technical lighting choices made later in the pipeline, is characteristic of how Pixar has historically approached the visual identity of its films, treating color and light not merely as technical rendering problems but as expressive tools tied directly to storytelling and mood, with brighter, more saturated palettes reserved for the vibrant reef sequences and cooler, murkier tones used to convey danger in the open ocean or the sterile artificiality of the dentist's office aquarium. The production also wove in a number of deliberate references and homages to earlier works, some overt and some more like inside jokes for attentive viewers. The character of Bruce, the great white shark trying to abstain from eating fish as part of a support group, takes his name from the nickname given to the mechanical shark used on the set of the 1975 Steven Spielberg film Jaws, itself named after Bruce Rummer, who was Spielberg's lawyer at the time. The film pushes this reference further with Bruce's memorable line, "Here's Brucey," a direct riff on Jack Nicholson's famous "Here's Johnny" from the 1980 horror film The Shining. Elsewhere, the ominous musical cue that accompanies the dentist's niece Darla, the young girl notorious among the Tank Gang for her history of accidentally killing pet fish, borrows Bernard Herrmann's iconic shower scene theme from Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 film Psycho, using a recognizable piece of suspense movie shorthand to comic effect in a children's film. Even the design of the film's flock of seagulls carries a lineage back to prior animation. The birds were modeled after the character Feathers McGraw, the villainous penguin from the 1993 Wallace and Gromit short film The Wrong Trousers, reflecting the influence that British stop-motion animation had on some of the visual comedy choices made by the Pixar team. The finished film carries a dedication to Glenn McQueen, a Pixar animator who died of melanoma in October 2002, not long before the film's release the following year, a tribute reflecting the close-knit, collaborative culture of the studio during this era of its growth. Separately, the film's production later became entangled in an unusual legal dispute originating outside the United States. Finding Nemo was found by a French author, Frank Le Calvez, to share numerous plot elements with his own children's book, Pierrot the Clownfish, which had been published in 2002, but which Le Calvez claimed to have originally conceived several years earlier, in 1995. Le Calvez sued Disney in French courts, alleging infringement of his intellectual rights and seeking to bar the sale of Finding Nemo merchandise within France. The presiding judge ultimately ruled against Le Calvez, basing the decision in part on differences in coloration between his character Pierrot and the Disney Pixar character Nemo, and the case did not result in any restriction on the film's French release or merchandising. Long after the film's original theatrical run, its production history took on an unusual linguistic and cultural coda. In 2016, Rick Dempsey, Senior Vice President of Disney Character Voices International, collaborated with the Navajo Nation Museum to produce a complete Navajo language dub of the film, titled Nemo Hadiesti, which received a limited theatrical release on the Navajo Nation from March 18 to March 24 of that year. The project was conceived explicitly as a tool for language preservation, intended to help introduce and reinforce the Navajo language among younger generations of speakers through the appeal of a widely beloved Disney film. Casting proved to be one of the more difficult logistical elements of the project. The studio held open auditions on the reservation itself, but according to Dempsey, finding an age-appropriate native speaker fluent enough to voice the young character of Nemo proved unexpectedly difficult, since the overwhelming majority of fluent native Navajo speakers were over the age of 40. The end credits rendition of the standard Beyond the Sea, which in the film's English language version was performed by pop singer Robbie Williams, was likewise translated and re-recorded in Navajo, with Fall Out Boy frontman Patrick Stump providing the vocal performance for this special version. When it was completed, Finding Nemo became only the second film ever to receive an official Navajo language dub, following a similar effort undertaken previously for the original Star Wars. Filming, although the term filming applies loosely to a fully computer animated production, the process functioned analogously to live action production in the sense that voice performances were captured, staged, and directed much as an actor's performance would be captured on a physical set, and the resulting vocal tracks then informed how animators built out each shot. Much of the character-defining material that shaped the finished film emerged directly out of these recording sessions rather than being locked in purely on the page beforehand. Albert Brooks' comic instincts as Marlin, for example, were given room to breathe during recording, with Brooks contributing improvised material, including the deliberately terrible jokes that became a running character trait, material that reportedly grew directly out of studio recording sessions rather than being scripted in advance. Similarly, the story of Andrew Stanton's own performance as Crush illustrates how fluid the line was between reference recording and final performance capture on this production. His voice work, originally intended only as a temporary guide track for the story reel, was recorded informally, with Stanton lying on a sofa in co-director Lee Unkrich's office rather than in a formal recording booth, and this relaxed, almost accidental recording environment ended up producing a vocal performance so well matched to the character that it was retained for the finished film rather than being replaced by a professional actor as originally planned. The film story conferences The working sessions in which the director and writers hashed out plot and character beats were themselves an important and somewhat informal part of how material got generated for the film. The initiation sequence involving Dory, one of the film's most memorable set pieces, is reported to have originated during a story conference between Stanton and co-writer Bob Peterson that took place notably while the two men were driving to a recording session with the cast rather than in a formal writer's room, indicating the extent to which ideas for the film continued to develop informally throughout the production process rather than being frozen at the screenplay stage. Because the film's visual world depended so heavily on convincing underwater movement and lighting, decisions made during the animation phase were closely tied to the research the animators had done earlier during pre-production. The scuba diving lessons taken by the artistic staff, along with the in-house lectures from an ichthyologist and diving expeditions specifically undertaken in Hawaii to observe reef fish behavior, fed directly into how individual shots were animated. Since the animators were drawing not on second-hand references, but on their own direct observation of how fish schools move together, how individual species carry themselves differently in the water, and how light scatters and refracts at different depths. This grounding in direct observation is part of why the film's undersea sequences were singled out so consistently by critics for their visual believability once the finished film reached audiences, since the movement of the fish felt observed and specific rather than generically animated. The production also had to solve numerous technical rendering challenges specific to simulating an underwater environment convincingly, including the behavior of light shafts penetrating from the surface, the particulate haze and visual depth of open water, the refractive distortion of objects seen through moving water, and the physical buoyancy and drag that would realistically affect how characters swam, floated, or were carried by currents. These technical demands pushed Pixar's rendering technology and pipeline forward in ways that would carry over into the studio's subsequent productions, part of an ongoing pattern in which each Pixar film of this era tackled a specific unsolved technical problem, fur and cloth simulation, crowd animation, and so forth, that then became a standard tool available for future films. Post-production on Finding Nemo followed the same general path traveled by prior Pixar films, in which the story reel, the rough animatic assembled from storyboards, placeholder dialogue, and temporary music, continued to be refined even as final character animation, lighting, rendering, and sound work proceeded, because Stanton had entered the production with a complete screenplay already in hand, an unusual position for an animated feature at this stage of its process. The post-production phase of the film was somewhat more stable structurally than had been the case for some of Pixar's earlier films, where entire plot lines and character arcs had sometimes been substantially reworked deep into the editing process. Even so, elements continued to be adjusted after the story reel stage, as demonstrated by the eventual removal of the Bad Luck Bay backstory scene for Gil and the scaling back of the Pelican character Gerald, both changes made in response to how those elements played once assembled and tested rather than being cut at the initial writing stage. Editing on the film was overseen by David Ian Salter, whose work in shaping pacing and structure would have been particularly important given how much of the film's momentum depends on cutting between Marlin and Dory's ocean-spanning journey and Nemo's parallel storyline trapped in the dentist's office aquarium. Balancing these two threads, keeping each one moving forward at a pace that sustains tension and comic timing without letting either storyline stall while the other develops, is a structural challenge that falls largely to the editorial stage of post production, particularly once voice performances, temporary animation, and early cuts of specific sequences have been assembled and need to be refined into a cohesive whole. As with all of Pixar's theatrical features to this point, the studio also produced a companion short film to Company, Finding Nemo, during its theatrical run, a bonus feature intended to be projected ahead of the main film in cinemas. The short chosen to accompany Finding Nemo was Knick Knack, itself one of the studio's earlier and more famous short films, which had originally been produced years before the feature and was revived for this theatrical pairing, giving audiences who saw the film in cinemas an additional piece of Pixar's short form output as part of their movie-going experience. A key part of the film's overall post-production output was a separate educational documentary short exploring the reef with Jean-Michel Cousteau, released in 2003 in connection with the film. Produced in collaboration with the well-known oceanographer and filmmaker Jean-Michel Cousteau, the documentary was designed to extend the film's underwater subject matter into a more directly educational context, giving young audiences and their families additional factual material about coral reefs and marine life to complement the fictional narrative of the feature film. This short would later find a natural home as bonus material bundled with the film's home media releases. Music Finding Nemo holds a notable distinction within Pixar's early filmography as the first Pixar feature not to be scored by composer Randy Newman, who had provided the music for each of the studio's previous productions and had become closely associated with the studio's sound in the public imagination. In his place, the studio brought on Thomas Newman, Randy Newman's cousin, to compose the score, marking a deliberate shift in the studio's musical identity, even while keeping the scoring duties within the extended Newman family of film composers. Thomas Newman was already an established and highly regarded composer for both dramatic and comedic films. By this point in his career, known for a musical style that often blended orchestral instrumentation with unconventional percussion, prepared piano, and textured electronic elements, an approach that lent itself naturally to the whimsical, sometimes melancholic, sometimes buoyant tone that Finding Nemo's story called for. The score needed to accomplish a wide emotional range across the course of the film, moving from the sudden trauma of the opening barracuda attack through the anxious, sheltered domestic tone established between Marlin and young Nemo into the buoyant, exploratory feeling of the ocean journey undertaken by Marlin and Dory, and finally into moments of genuine suspense and danger as the characters encounter sharks, anglerfish, jellyfish, forests, and a fishing trawler net. Newman's score was tasked with unifying all of these tonal shifts into a single musical identity for the film, giving audiences an emotional through line even as the visual content of the story swung between comedy, adventure, and genuine peril. The film's original soundtrack album, featuring Newman's complete score, was released on May 20, 2003, timed to arrive in stores just before the film's wide theatrical release later that same month. The score received significant industry recognition in the months following the film's release, earning a nomination for the Academy Award for Original Score at the ceremony honoring films from 2003. It ultimately lost in that category to the score for The Lord of the Rings. The Return of the King, a film that swept a remarkable number of Oscar categories that year, tying the all-time record for total Academy Awards won by a single film. Despite losing the Oscar in that particular category, the nomination itself represented a significant validation of Thomas Newman's approach and helped establish him as a composer capable of stepping into a role previously defined almost entirely by his cousin's musical voice at the studio. Beyond the original score, the film also featured a memorable use of a pre-existing song during its end credits, a cover of the jazz standard Beyond the Sea, performed for the film by British pop singer Robbie Williams. The song, a swinging seafaring standard with an obvious thematic connection to the film's oceanic setting, became one of the more recognizable pieces of music associated with the film's marketing and home video releases, and it was significant enough to the film's identity that it was later specifically translated and re-recorded, with Fall Out Boy's Patrick Stump singing the Navajo language version when the film received its 2016 Navajo dub. Rolese theatrical Finding Nemo occupies a specific and somewhat unusual place in the sequence of Pixar's early theatrical releases. It was the studio's fifth feature film overall, following Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, and Monsters, Inc., but it broke from the pattern established by all four of those predecessors by being released during the domestic summer movie-going season rather than in November, which had been the studio's customary release window up to that point. This shift to a summer release placed Finding Nemo in direct competition with a much more crowded and higher stakes release calendar than Pixar's earlier films had faced, going up against major studio tentpole releases rather than counter-programming into a quieter autumn window. And the decision reflected a growing confidence within Disney and Pixar that the film could compete directly with the biggest releases of the year rather than needing the relatively less contested environment of a fall release date. The film's very first public unveiling took place at a premiere held at the historic El Capitan Theater in Los Angeles on May 18, 2003, a venue Disney had used previously for high-profile premieres of its animated releases and one closely associated with the company's brand identity. Following this Los Angeles premiere, the film opened in wide theatrical release across the United States on May 30, 2003, arriving in cinemas the same weekend as two other releases: the action comedy remake The Italian Job and the horror film Wrong Turn, giving the weekend's box office a notably varied lineup spanning family animation, mainstream action comedy, and horror. Ahead of its release, the film benefited from an extensive and carefully staged theatrical marketing campaign built around a sequence of trailers rolled out over nearly a full year. Disney released the first teaser trailer for Finding Nemo in June 2002, nearly a full year ahead of the film's eventual release, attaching it to theatrical screenings of Lilo and Stitch, another Disney animated release enjoying its own theatrical run at the time. That same teaser was subsequently attached to screenings of several other family-oriented releases, including Hey Arnold the Movie, the Powerpuff Girls movie Stuart Little 2, and Jonah, a VeggieTales movie, ensuring the teaser reached audiences already inclined toward animated and family entertainment. The teaser also appeared on home video releases of Disney and Pixar's own prior film Monsters, Inc., as well as other Disney home video titles, extending its reach into the home viewing market well before the new film had even entered its main marketing push. A second, more developed trailer followed in October 2002, attached to theatrical screenings of The Santa Claus 2, Treasure Planet, and The Wild Thornberrys movie. continuing the strategy of pairing the marketing material with other family-friendly theatrical releases. A third trailer arrived in February 2003, shown alongside The Jungle Book 2, and a fourth and final trailer was released in March 2003, paired with screenings of Piglet's Big Movie. This steady drumbeat of trailers, spaced out over roughly 9 months and consistently paired with other animated or family-oriented films, already drawing audiences to theaters, reflected a deliberate strategy of building anticipation gradually among precisely the demographic most likely to turn out for the film on opening weekend. The film's marketing extended well beyond traditional trailers into an unusually large and wide-ranging set of promotional tie-ins and licensing partnerships, reflecting the scale of consumer product activity that had by this point become standard practice for major family-oriented theatrical releases. McDonald's restaurants began selling a set of 8 Happy Meal toys based on the film's characters, a standard component of family film marketing at the time that helped extend the film's visibility to very young children and their parents making fast food purchasing decisions. At the 100th North American International Toy Fair held in New York City, toy manufacturer Hasbro unveiled its own line of Finding Nemo toys, giving retailers and industry press an early look at the merchandise before it reached store shelves. Kellogg's produced a Finding Nemo themed breakfast cereal built around naturally sweetened oats mixed with fish shaped marshmallows, directly evoking the film's aquatic cast of characters in a cereal aisle product. The scale of the promotional tie-in campaign extended across a wide array of additional corporate partners, including Frito-Lay, the cookie and cracker company, Keebler, Pepsi, the grocery chain Ralph's, the ice cream brand Dreyer's, Gelsert, the candy brand Airheads, Orville Redenbacher's popcorn, and video game publisher THQ. In one particularly large-scale promotion, stickers placed on more than 50 million bags of potato chips ahead of May 26, 2003, alerted consumers to a sweepstakes offering a trip for 4 people to Sydney, Australia, complete with a visit to the Great Barrier Reef, directly tying the prize to the film's Australian setting. On May 17, 2003, Frito-Lay staged a promotional event at Walmart stores nationwide in which children were given 3D goggles designed to reveal hidden images of Nemo embedded in packaging or in-store displays. Kellogg's promotional activity around the film was especially extensive. The company packed eight different water-based toys, each depicting a different film character, inside boxes of Frosted Flakes, Rice Krispies, Honey Smacks, and Cocoa Rice Krispies cereal. Several of these cereal boxes, including Honey Smacks, Frosted Flakes, Cinnamon Crunch Crispix, and Fruit Loops, also carried a Nemo-themed memory card game printed on their back panels, and a special Nemo-branded Marshmallow Fruit Loops variety featuring 4 of the film's characters was produced as well. Consumers who mailed in proof of purchase codes from 2 of the Kellogg's cereals involved in the promotion could redeem them for a branded beach towel. Kellogg's additionally introduced a limited edition variety of Pop-Tarts inspired by the film, marketed as Great Berry Reef Pop-Tarts and featuring a wild berry filling along with fish-shaped sprinkles, and a redeemable pool raft was made available to consumers who sent in proof of purchase codes from 2 boxes of the Pop-Tarts along with a shipping fee, with fulfillment handled by the Chicago advertising agency later known as Draft Worldwide, then part of FCB. Eggo Waffles offered holographic swimming goggles to consumers who purchased 2 of its products and covered shipping and handling costs. And in the snack division, Kellogg's offered a large inflatable shark toy to consumers who purchased 2 packages of select snack products along with 2 gallons of milk. The film's imagery also appeared in advertising on a range of additional Kellogg's owned snack products, including vanilla wafers, Chips Deluxe, mini fudge, shop fudge stripes, soft batch chocolate chip cookies, Rice Krispies treats, and a line of limited edition Nemo themed cookies. Not all of this promotional activity proceeded without friction. On May 20, 2003, Kellogg's was forced to recall its Frosted Flakes cereal boxes after it emerged that the packaging bore an extremely close resemblance to an existing Hasbro memory card game. A lawsuit followed, with court filings including a full-page reproduction of the front of a Frosted Flakes box depicting the brand's longtime mascot, Tony the Tiger, grinning alongside the Finding Nemo characters Nemo, Dory, and Crush. Disney had licensed the use of its characters for the memory card game promotion, but Hasbro pursued the suit specifically to protect its own trademark against what it viewed as clear infringement stemming from the way the licensed characters had been combined with game mechanics, closely resembling Hasbro's existing product. Once the film reached theaters, its box office trajectory proved to be one of the defining stories of the 2003 summer movie season, discussed in more detail below. But its theatrical release itself proceeded on a fairly conventional wide release model for a major studio family film of the era, with no reported platform release or staggered rollout. The film opened nationwide on its May 30 release date and remained in general release through the summer months. Nearly a decade after its original theatrical run, Finding Nemo returned to cinemas in a new format following the commercially successful 3D theatrical re-release of Disney's earlier animated classic, The Lion King. Disney opted to give Finding Nemo the same treatment, re-releasing the film in converted 3D on September 14, 2012. The cost of converting the original 2D animation into a stereoscopic 3D presentation was estimated to be under $5 million, a modest expenditure relative to the film's original production budget, and one that reflected the studio's confidence that even a relatively low-cost conversion could generate meaningful additional box office revenue from a beloved and still commercially potent title. Home media Finding Nemo made its home video debut on November 4, 2003, arriving simultaneously on both VHS and DVD, with both formats sourced from the same digital master and carrying THX certification, a technical seal indicating that the audio and video quality of the release met a defined industry standard for home playback fidelity. The film's home video release strategy included a 2-disc collector's edition DVD package that offered substantially more supplementary content than a standard single-disc release. The first disc of this edition contained a widescreen presentation of the film itself, along with a selection of behind-the-scenes documentaries, image galleries, and a feature-length audio commentary track featuring the voices of director Andrew Stanton, co-director Lee Unkrich, and co-writer Bob Peterson discussing the production. The second disc contained a full-frame or pan and scan presentation of the film intended for viewers with older non-widescreen television sets, along with interactive games, promotional sneak peeks at upcoming Disney and Pixar releases, including The Incredibles and Home on the Range, and 2 bonus short films, Knick Knack, the short that had originally accompanied Finding Nemo during its theatrical run, and Exploring the Reef, the educational Jean-Michel Cousteau documentary produced in connection with the film. This second disc also included material documenting the film's extensive advertising campaign, Both discs in the collector's edition featured video introductions recorded by Stanton and Arnkrich, along with interactive virtual aquarium features built around the various underwater settings depicted in the film, giving viewers an additional, more playful way to engage with the film's visual world outside the context of the narrative itself. The commercial performance of this home video release turned out to be extraordinary by the standards of the industry at the time. On its very first day of availability, the DVD release of Finding Nemo sold more than 8 million copies, a figure that broke the previous record for single-day DVD sales, a record that had been held by the home video release of Spider-Man from the prior year. The film's opening day performance also surpassed the previous high mark for an animated film's single-day DVD sales, a record that had been set by Pixar's own prior release, Monsters, Inc. Within roughly 2 weeks of its release. Finding Nemo had gone on to become the best-selling DVD of its time, overall having sold more than 15 million copies, a total sufficient to surpass The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, one of the major home video successes of the preceding year. The film's home video dominance continued to build throughout the remainder of 2003. In terms of DVD rental performance specifically, Finding Nemo reached the #1 position on the weekly rental charts in its very first week of availability, beating out competing new releases including Legally Blonde, Red, White and Blonde, Hulk and 28 Days Later, and generating $6.5 million in rental revenue during that initial week. By December 2003, cumulative sales of the DVD had reached 16.4 million copies, generating $398. $3 million in total sales revenue, a performance sufficient to surpass The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and make Finding Nemo the highest-selling home video release of the entire year. When final tallies for 2003 were compiled, the film had sold a combined 18.5 million DVD copies and 3.7 million VHS copies, figures that made it simultaneously the best-selling DVD title and the best-selling VHS title of that calendar year, with the DVD figure overtaking The Two Towers and the VHS figure overtaking Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets in their respective formats. Over the longer term, the film's home video sales figures continued to accumulate, and by 2006, more than 40 million copies of the DVD had been sold, a cumulative total that has been cited as making Finding Nemo the best-selling DVD title of all time, a distinction that, as of the most recent references available, the film continued to hold. Its commercial dominance in the home video market during this period paralleled its theatrical box office, standing as the highest-grossing G-rated film ever released, a record it held until Pixar's own subsequent release, Toy Story 3, surpassed it in 2010 as home video technology continued to evolve in the years following the DVD era. Finding Nemo was reissued in newer formats to keep pace with changing consumer playback standards. The film was released on both standard Blu-ray and the stereoscopic Blu-ray 3D format on December 4, 2012, coinciding with the period following its theatrical 3D re-release. And this release was made available in both a 3-disc set and a more expansive 5-disc set, presumably differentiated by the amount of bonus content and number of format versions included. Later, in 2019, the film received a further home video upgrade with its release on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, bringing the nearly 2-decade-old film into line with the highest home video resolution and color standards available at that time, and ensuring its continued availability to new generations of collectors and viewers seeking the best possible technical presentation of the film in a physical home media format.